I didn't just lose a wife. I gained a front row seat to the most satisfying train wreck in the history of suburban Maryland. Most guys would have spent that Friday night in a blind rage, throwing punches or weeping into a whiskey glass. But as I sat there cutting into a perfectly seared ribeye, I felt a strange, cold clarity. The front door swung open with a practiced theatricality, and there stood Chloe, my wife of 7 years, looking like she'd just won the lottery. But she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was a guy named Jax, a man who looked like he'd been assembled in a factory specifically to annoy middle-aged husbands. He was all spray tan, overpriced denim, and a smirk that screamed unearned confidence. Chloe didn't even look at the dinner I'd spent 2 hours preparing. She just gestured to Jax and said, "Finally, a real man who knows how to treat a woman. You can stop playing house now, David." Before we dive into the wreckage of a marriage built on lies, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had a partner try to replace you right under your own roof? I want to hear your stories. The silence in the room was heavy, but I didn't break it. I took a slow, deliberate bite of steak, chewed, and swallowed while Chloe launched into a scripted monologue she must have been practicing in her head for weeks. She talked about vibrations, emotional fulfillment, and how Jax was a high performer who made my steady career in logistics look like a paper route. Jax just stood there, leaning against my mahogany sideboard, looking at my house like he already owned it. He didn't realize that the alpha male persona he was projecting was about to collide with a very cold, very legal reality. Chloe leaned over the table, her eyes glittering with a cruel sort of triumph, and whispered that it was time for me to pack my bags and slither away so they could start their life together. I didn't yell. I didn't even stand up. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy brass ring of spare keys. Then, with a slow, mechanical precision, I twisted the gold band off my left ring finger. The skin underneath was pale, a ghost of a commitment that had died months ago. I slid both the keys and the ring across the polished wood until they clicked against Jax's designer belt buckle. "Congratulations, pal," I said, my voice as steady as a surgeon's. "She's your problem now. Honestly, I should probably be thanking you for the relief." Jax's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. He looked down at the ring like it was a live grenade. Chloe let out a sharp, mocking laugh, calling me a loser and telling me that my pathetic attempt at dignity wouldn't save me from the curb. She was so caught up in the thrill of the betrayal that she failed to notice the one thing that should have terrified her. I wasn't packing a suitcase. I hadn't moved a single muscle toward the bedroom. "You might want to hold on to those keys tight, Jax," I continued, leaning back in my chair. "You're going to need them to lock up. Just a heads up, though, Chloe's taste for Italian leather and vintage champagne usually runs about double whatever monthly salary you're pulling in. And a word of advice, the soulmate talk usually evaporates the exact second the credit card chip reader flashes declined. She's a world-class sprinter when the money runs out." Chloe's face turned a mottled shade of red. She started screaming about how Jax was a millionaire in the making, how they didn't need my stale, boring life. She told me to get out of her house before she called the police. That was the moment I finally stood up. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin and checked my watch. It was 7:15 p.m. Right on cue, a heavy rumbling sound echoed from the driveway outside, the unmistakable hiss of air brakes from a professional moving truck. "Funny thing about this house, Chloe," I said, walking toward the coat closet. "You always called it ours, but you never did like looking at the paperwork. If you had, you'd remember that this property is held in a family trust. My mother's name is on the deed, and she's never been a fan of yours, especially after I showed her the photos of you and Jax at the Pier House Resort last month." The color began to drain from Chloe's face as the doorbell rang. It wasn't the police. It was 3 burly men in gray uniforms, carrying stacks of flattened boxes and rolls of packing tape. I didn't look back at her as I grabbed my jacket. I had already spent 3 months preparing for this specific 5-minute window. Every piece of furniture, every heirloom, and even the high-end appliances she loved so much were scheduled to be in a storage unit by midnight. "The lease for the furniture is up. The utilities are being cut at 8 a.m., and since you're not a tenant on the deed, the movers are instructed to put anything that isn't mine, meaning your clothes and Jax's ego, straight onto the sidewalk," I told them. Jax finally found his voice, stepping forward with a weak attempt at intimidation. But he stopped when he saw me pull out my phone and hit play on a video. It wasn't a video of them. It was a video of his own office, a rented cubicle in a shared workspace he hadn't paid for in 2 months, coupled with a public record of his recent bankruptcy filing. I'd done my homework. I'd done all of it. As I walked out the front door, leaving Chloe screaming at the movers and Jax staring at the keys like they were handcuffs, I didn't feel a shred of regret. The cool night air hit my face, and I headed straight for the black SUV idling at the curb. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a woman who knew Chloe better than anyone. Her best friend, Megan. Megan had been the one who handed me the hotel receipts. She had been the one who sat with me for hours, documenting every lie Chloe told. She wasn't there to comfort a broken man. She was there to witness the departure. I climbed into the driver's seat, and Megan looked at me with a sharp, knowing smile. "Did you give him the ring?" she asked. "I gave him everything," I replied, putting the car in gear, including the debt. As we pulled away, I could see Chloe in the rearview mirror, standing on the porch, frantically gesturing at Jax, who was already backing toward his car, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. The real man was already looking for the exit, and the show was just getting started. As we drove away from the curb, the glow of the house fading in the rearview mirror, Megan let out a breath she'd been holding for a long time. I could hear the faint, rhythmic thud of the movers starting their work behind us, the sound of a life being dismantled piece by piece. My phone was already vibrating in the center console. I didn't have to look to know it was Chloe. First would come the rage, then the confusion, and eventually, the desperate bargaining. But for now, the silence in the car felt like a luxury I hadn't been able to afford in years. "You're surprisingly calm, David," Megan said, her eyes fixed on the house as it vanished from sight. "Most men would be halfway through a breakdown right now. You just walked out like you were leaving a boring movie." "I did leave a boring movie," I replied, my hand steady on the steering wheel. "I've been watching the same tired plot for 18 months. The working late, excuses, the sudden obsession with the gym, the way she started hiding her phone like it contained state secrets. Once you see the strings, the puppet show isn't entertaining anymore." We pulled into a quiet diner a few miles away, a place where the coffee is strong and the booths are deep enough to hide in. I needed a moment to breathe before the next phase of the plan kicked in. Megan pulled a thick manila folder from her bag and laid it on the Formica table. This was the fruit of our labor, the detailed map of Chloe's double life. It wasn't just the affair with Jax. It was the financial house of cards she'd built behind my back. While I had been diligently paying the mortgage and contributing to our joint savings, Chloe had been opening secret lines of credit. She'd used my credit score as a ladder to reach heights of luxury she couldn't afford, and she'd done it with a terrifying level of calculation. I looked at the statements. Thousands of dollars spent on designer boutiques, weekend getaways I wasn't invited to, and investments into Jax's supposed tech startup that was really just a shell company for his gambling debts. "She really thinks Jax is her golden ticket," Megan whispered, stirring her coffee. "She told me last week that he was going to take her to Dubai for the winter. She has no idea that the bank is 2 days away from repossessing that luxury car he drives." "She'll find out soon enough," I said. "The moment the movers put her vanity and her shoe collection on the pavement, she's going to turn to her real man for a solution. And Jax is a guy who disappears the second a situation requires actual effort." Just then, my phone lit up with a text message. It wasn't a call this time. It was a photo from one of the movers I'd hired, a guy named Rick who had a bit of a streak for justice himself. The photo showed the front lawn of my house, my mother's lawn. It was covered in Chloe's expensive luggage, her yoga equipment, and that ridiculous oversized portrait of herself she'd insisted on hanging in the foyer. Standing in the middle of the mess was Jax, holding a single suitcase and looking at his phone. He wasn't helping her. He was standing 5 feet away, looking like a man who had just realized he'd boarded a sinking ship. The irony was delicious. Chloe had spent months belittling my predictability. She wanted fire. She wanted passion. She wanted a man who took what he wanted. Well, she got exactly what she asked for. She got a man who took her away from a stable life and was now about to leave her holding the bag when things got uncomfortable. "What's the move now?" Megan asked, her expression turning serious. "You know she's going to try to claw her way back. She's a predator, David. She knows exactly which buttons to push to make you feel guilty. Let her push them," I said, sliding the folder back to her. I've already changed the locks on the secondary accounts. I've alerted the fraud department at the bank about the unauthorized card she opened. By tomorrow morning, every piece of plastic in her wallet will be about as useful as a bookmark. She wanted to be with a high performer? Let's see how he performs when they're sharing a cheap motel room and a bag of fast food. I felt a strange surge of adrenaline. For years, I had been the provider, the protector, the one who smoothed over every bump in the road. I had allowed myself to become a doormat in the name of keeping the peace. But the peace was a lie. As I sat in that diner, I realized that the man Chloe called boring was the only thing keeping her world from collapsing. Now that I'd stepped aside, gravity was going to do the rest of the work for me. We finished our coffee in silence, the weight of the betrayal finally starting to lift, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I had spent 20 years building a reputation and a life, and I wasn't about to let a midlife crisis and a con artist take it from me. I stood up, dropped a $20 bill on the table, and looked at Megan. "The movers should be done by now," I said. "Let's go see where the dust settled." As we drove back toward the neighborhood, I saw a familiar flash of blue lights in the distance. My heart skipped a beat. Had someone called the police? As we got closer, I realized the lights weren't for me. They were for Jax's car. A tow truck was backed up to his shiny, leased SUV, and two officers were talking to a frantic, disheveled Chloe on the sidewalk. Jax was nowhere to be seen. He had literally vanished the moment the pressure mounted, leaving her standing among her boxes like a queen of a kingdom made of cardboard. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just kept driving, knowing that for the first time in a decade, I was finally heading in the right direction. The road ahead was wide open, and for once, I wasn't the one carrying everyone else's luggage. Only a few hours had passed, but Chloe's world had already crumbled into ruins. Watching in the rearview mirror as the tow truck hauled away the last remnants of her new boyfriend's status, I felt no malice, only a frightening sense of calm. It was like watching a documentary on the forces of nature. Once the foundation rots, the building falls on its own. Julia sat beside me, typing away on her phone, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the screen. She had been my secret ally, my eyes and ears in a world Chloe thought was her private playground. "Mark has vanished, David," Julia said softly, not looking up from her messages. "His phone is disconnected. It seems as soon as he realized the house belongs to your mother and not you, and that the accounts are frozen, his unconditional love expired faster than his overdue credit cards. He just hopped in a cab while Chloe was arguing with the cops over the parking situation." I turned onto a quiet street leading to a small condo I'd leased in my name a month ago. This was my lifeboat, prepared in secret from everyone. Chloe always thought of me as predictable and slow, but she forgot one thing. In logistics, the winner is the one who calculates the route 10 steps ahead. While she was picking out outfits for dates with Mark, I was transferring assets, closing joint accounts, and documenting every cent she spent. Expenditures that were now legally classified as dissipation of marital assets for the benefit of a lover. My phone came to life again. This time, it was a voice message. I hit the speakerphone. Chloe's hysterical scream erupted from the device, punctuated by jagged sobs. "David, you monster. You threw me out on the street. It's raining, my bags are soaked, and that jerk Mark just drove off. You have no right to do this. This is my house too. Come back right now and deal with these people." I cut the recording. She still didn't get it. She was still waiting for boring David to rush over, cover her with his umbrella, pay for a hotel, and apologize for upsetting her. She was used to me being her insurance policy. "You know what the most interesting part is?" I said to Julia as I parked the car. "She hasn't even asked how I found out. Her conscience isn't bothering her about the cheating. She's only tortured by the fact that the comfort suddenly ended. To her, a real man is just someone who solves her problems without asking questions. Tonight, she learned that those men have a breaking point too. We went up to the apartment. It smelled of fresh paint and a new life. On the table lay a sealed packet from my lawyer. This was surprise number 2. In Maryland, proven adultery combined with financial manipulation can turn a divorce into a living nightmare for the guilty party, especially if that party used their husband's money to support another man. "She'll be served first thing tomorrow morning," I said, opening my laptop. Everything is in there. The hotel photos, the bank statements, the receipts for the watch she gave Mark on our anniversary. I don't just want a divorce. I want back every cent she stole from our future. Julia walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. She's going to call every friend we have. She'll say you're abusive, that you left her with nothing. She's already started posting on social media about toxic relationships. Let her post, I smirked. I have the screenshots of her texts with Mark where they laugh about what a pushover I am and how easy it is to milk my credit cards. If she wants to put on a public show, I'll provide the script, backed by hard facts. At our age, reputation is everything, and she just set hers on fire. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. I didn't have nightmares about betrayal. I dreamed of numbers, spreadsheets, and a clear, transparent tomorrow. But the morning brought a new surprise. Around 6 o'clock, someone began pounding frantically on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Chloe. She looked terrible, smeared mascara, a soaked coat, and in her hands was a pathetic cardboard box, presumably the little she'd managed to salvage from the sidewalk. I opened the door, leaving the security chain on. She froze, her eyes filling with the kind of tears that used to make my heart shatter. Now, I only saw bad acting. "David, please," she whispered. "Mark, he wasn't who I thought he was. He stole my last bit of cash and disappeared. I have nowhere to go. Please, let me in. We can talk about this. I made a mistake. I was in a fog, but I see everything now. You're the only one who ever truly loved me." She tried to slide her hand through the gap, but I remained motionless. At that moment, Julia appeared behind me in my bathrobe, holding 2 cups of coffee. She didn't say a word. She just calmly looked at Chloe. My wife's face transformed in a second. Shock turned into pure, primal rage. "You?" she shrieked. "My best friend. So that's why you were asking me all those pointed questions about Mark. You two were together this whole time." I felt something final click into place. Even now, Chloe was trying to shift the blame, to make herself the victim of a conspiracy. She couldn't accept that her own actions had led her to this closed door. "Julia helped me see the truth I refused to notice for 7 years," I said evenly. "And no, Chloe, we aren't together in the way you mean. We're just 2 people who are no longer willing to tolerate your lies. Leave. Your things are on the sidewalk at my mother's place. If the rain hasn't ruined them yet, I suggest you hurry." I closed the door right in her face. From the other side, I heard a dull thud as she fell to her knees, still screaming something about betrayal. But her voice grew quieter and quieter, until it was just a distant noise that had nothing to do with me anymore. The fallout was swift and merciless. Watching the legal papers being served to Chloe through my doorbell camera the next morning was the closure I didn't know I needed. She was standing in the rain outside a cheap motel, her designer suitcase looking absurd against the cracked pavement. When the server handed her the thick envelope, she didn't scream this time. She just looked hollow. She finally realized that the boring man who provided her world had officially left the building, and he'd taken the foundation with him. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in reconstruction. With Julia's help, I didn't just survive the divorce. I reclaimed my identity. We sat in my new office, surrounded by the silence of a life no longer cluttered by Chloe's constant demands and expensive dramas. Julia had been the one to point out that while I was busy building a future, Chloe was busy burning the present. It wasn't a romance between me and Julia, at least, not yet. It was something much rarer. A partnership built on mutual respect and the shared wreckage of a friendship Chloe had discarded like a used tissue. The court hearing was a short affair. My lawyer presented the lifestyle audit I'd meticulously prepared. When the judge saw the sheer volume of business expenses Chloe had funneled into Mark's failed ventures, the look of disgust on his face said everything. Because the house was in a family trust and the debt was tied to accounts she had opened through identity misrepresentation, the ruling was a landslide. I walked out of that courtroom with my dignity, my assets, and a permanent restraining order. Chloe tried to send one last message through a mutual friend, a long, rambling email about how Mark had ditched her for a younger woman the second her credit cards were canceled. She was living in a studio apartment above a noisy garage, working a retail job she used to mock. She claimed she was finding herself. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the email to my lawyer and hit delete. I'm 55 years old, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel like a pack mule for someone else's vanity. I spent my life with a woman who mistook my kindness for weakness, and now she's learning that once a good man is done, he is done forever. I'm finally with someone who doesn't need me to be a real man by her definition, because she's a real woman who values the man I've always been. Author's thoughts. This story serves as a powerful reminder that the quietest people often have the loudest plans when pushed too far. David's boring nature was actually his greatest strength. His ability to remain calm, observe, and strategize allowed him to exit a toxic situation with his life intact. Chloe's downfall wasn't just caused by her infidelity, it was her arrogance. She assumed that because David was kind, he was blind. In the end, the real man she chased was a ghost, and the man she ridiculed was the only real thing she ever had. That brings us to the end of this incredible journey of justice and self-discovery. If you enjoyed seeing a masterclass in how to handle a betrayal with dignity and a sharp plan, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button if you think David did the right thing, and drop a comment below. Would you have the patience to gather evidence for months, or would you have ended it the second you knew? We love hearing your perspectives. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next story.